Can't tell if my music is still playing or not. Oh, that's because I have another window open. Hi, everybody. Thanks. I have some technical difficulties going on right here at the beginning of my show. That's okay. My name is Kurtis, and welcome to LOAC-TV. This is the Library of American Comics Television. We are welcoming you here, everybody who's watching live on Facebook and on YouTube. We thank you so much for your support here. We got a special guest, and I'll introduce him in just a second. But I do want to say that we have some social media that you can follow if you want to be a part of, up to date on all of our news and such. You can follow us on Facebook and on Instagram and on Twitter and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And that is just look for Library of American Comics or LOA Comics on all of those platforms. You might have heard that we are going to be producing new editions of a couple of our Alex Toth books. The Genius Illustrated book is coming to paperback, which is very exciting. Plus, we're going to get a new edition of the Bravo for Adventure Artist Edition. So if you are fans of Alex Toth and you missed those books the first time around, in September, you'll get another chance to get your hands on those ones, which I'm very excited for. Okay, so we have a special guest today. We're going to be talking about Terry and the Pirates with none other than Howard Chaykin. Welcome to the show, Howard.
Hi, Kurtis. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm here in Vancouver. You're down in California. We're on the same time zone.
About time. Yeah.
How's life down there?
Life is great. Waiting for World War III to get rolling, and hoping it comes from the west as opposed to the east, rather. So that
we have a little bit of a heads up.
Well, yeah, we're doing. It's okay. So,
well,
comic books,
Yeah, yeah. We can talk about a little bit of a more cheery subject. We're going to talk about Terry and the Pirates today. And so, Howard, you wrote a good book, or a good introduction to the very first volume of Terry and the Pirates, which was published by the Library of American Comics. And so, I want to ask you first of all, what is your earliest memory of either Milton Caniff or Terry and the Pirates?
Well, my family took the Daily News when I was a little boy in New York City. We got the Daily News in the morning. And so I was familiar with George Wonder's Terry and the Pirates. I think as I said in the introduction to that book, that by the time I saw the Wonder material, it evolved into a kind of an oddly character. Everybody looked very equine in this material. I suspect it might have been the period in which George Evans was penciling it for Wonder. But at any rate, I found the strip unintelligible textually. I didn't know what the hell it was about. I couldn't figure out the narrative, but it had a certain appeal, and again, it had a reputation. So I felt it was necessary to take it seriously. And when I finally saw the original material, as I indicated in the interview, the introduction rather, I didn't really know what the big deal was about until I got deeper into the material. It takes a while, as I recall, for the strip to find itself, to become what it is. And I suspect it's because of Caniff is finally surrendering to the influence of Noel Sickles, to accepting the fact that what Sickles was talking about, what Sickles' idea had weight and merit in the material. And as a kid, when I would see individual pieces of Caniff's work, he would also often say that his mission, his ambition was to deliver illustration quality images on a daily basis. And because I was a child and not particularly well educated or well formed, I didn't identify what he did as illustration. I didn't understand what he meant, because it struck me as nowhere nearly as illustrative, say, as Harold Foster or Alex Raymond, which I mistook for the floridness of the melodrama of that work. I mistook for being illustrative, excellent and separate. And of course, as I become an adult, I recognize that Caniff was the genius of these men. That Raymond was a perfectly good draftsman, but for me, didn't become really interesting as an artist. As a kid, I loved the Flash Gordon stuff. As an adult, I have no interest in it whatsoever. I look at the Rick Kirby work. And Fawcett's work has a brilliant, studied historical quality to it, but it lacks the vigor and animation of Caniff's work. And the Caniff stuff is filled with a kind of self-aware melancholy and joy that is so much a part of that chunk of the middle 20th century, the first half of the 20th century, that was defined by the culture. He is, he's got Howard Hawks stuff going on. He's got Ernest Hemingway stuff going on, and it really does reflect a sense of the middle 20th century American man at its best. And beyond it's being astonishingly well drawn. And unfortunately, he leaves the strip in 46. He goes off and creates his own strip. And the thing about Caniff's work, the thing about his career, the thing about the arc of his work, starting with Terry and ending with Steve Canyon, is he makes, I think I mentioned this before we started, he makes interesting career choices that frequently make no sense to me whatsoever. Just that may have seemed like the right thing at the time, apparently, but it didn't work for me. I mean, Terry was a child when the strip begins, and he raises him to it's a boy's adventure story. And then when he starts dealing with the Japanese invasion of Manchuria, he ages Terry up very quickly. And it's because the strip is called Terry and the Pirates. Terry has to be the hero of the book of the strip, but Pat is obviously the hero. Pat is the adult, and it's the inverse of the Batman and Robin thing of what Jerry Robinson brought to Bill Finger and Bob Kane with Robin, and with all the teen sidekicks of the comic book stuff. And then in Canyon, he goes off and begins repeating himself and cannibalizing narratives and arcs of story from Terry in Canyon. And then when the Korean War starts, he has Canyon rejoin the service, and it becomes a military strip, which lost me completely at that point. I would have been much happier had the strip remained a bearded version of Air America, which is basically, I always thought Canyon was an OSS/CIA operative working in the private sector, serving the needs of the Central Intelligence Agency. That was my read of Air America, of Horizons Unlimited. But for me, Terry obviously reaches its peak in the war years, in its fatalism and its melancholy. But which is one of the reasons why I chose to do what I did in that one-page tribute I did. But all the characters are placed there in the 30s, and that ensemble nature of the strip is really what appealed to me enormously. It influenced me tremendously on the work I did on the American flag and on Times Square as well. I don't think I'd ever want to go back and say, wouldn't you like to draw? No, I wouldn't. I would not like to draw. I could see myself doing a pastiche of the material, but so much of my work is defined by the organization and use of design to serve a page that the idea of working in a 12-panel grid would drive me absolutely insane.
Yeah.
It would be a very difficult process for me. I mean, if I figured out a way to conflate Cliff Sterrett and Milton Caniff.
Oh man, what a combination that would be. Holy cow.
Collier Pals and Terry and the Pirates together again for the first time.
Yeah.
Merriment ensues.
You mentioned the aging up of Terry, and I wonder if that could also be seen as sort of commentary on just the effect that war had on young adults or teenagers at the time. It's like you had to grow up really fast in that era, and Terry could possibly be in that boat.
I think you might be right. I think that makes a great deal of sense. The character of Terry, the fecklessness of the little boy. I mean, we surrender almost immediately within the first couple of years of the strip to why they were there. They're just there.
Yeah.
They're just there. There's no reason. They don't refer to the treasure map or any of that other nonsense. It's just gone. It's fled the room. It's like Ray Donovan's son. He never shows up again. He's just sort of there. And it's okay, because the strip becomes a series of character sketches surrounding Terry, Papa Pison, Dragon Lady, April, Deeth, all these characters, and they're all deeply and dramatically influenced by Ernest Hemingway and Howard Hawks and John Ford and Raoul Walsh, the He-Man writers and filmmakers of that era. But no one had done it in a comic strip before. I mean, it was just, it never occurred to anyone to do this. And Caniff, I mean, a couple of years back, I got into a discussion, a lengthy back and forth, about the relative merits of Alex Toth's work as opposed to Bernie Krigstein's work. And one of the academics who takes this stuff very seriously, and justifiably so, indicated that he felt that there was a not his words but mine, a plasticity and a conventionality, a Hollywood prettiness about Toth's stuff. And he was right. It's true. I mean, Toth looks like Paramount. Also, Toth is hampered by a sense of narrative arrested development. There is no real idea about anything beyond melodrama and heroic fiction. And Caniff, to a certain extent, plants that seed. Caniff is very much a profound romantic in the dramatic sense of that era. I was reminded when I looked at the yellow page that we were talking about, that series of dailies, I was reminded of a review some years ago in the early days of people. I mean, you're young enough to remember. You don't remember the day before VHS and
no, I don't.
I mean, there was time before, and when that stuff first started coming to the home, a lot of what was being available was pornography and classic films, and one of those films was Only Angels Have Wings. And there was a review in one of your video magazines that dismissed Only Angels Have Wings as being more Milton Caniff than Ernest Hemingway. Fuck you. But fuck you. Yeah. There was a strong resonance there, a shared resonance. I'm not sure Hawks was. I mean, I'm sure Hawks. I take it back. I'm sure Hawks was familiar with Terry and the strips because everybody read comic strips in those days. I mean, John Steinbeck was renowned for being obsessed with Lil Abner, and people just knew it because it was a part of the cultural effluvia. And when I reread that yellow page this morning, I was reminded a great deal of Cary Grant and Jean Arthur, and Alan Jenkins and Noah Beery Sr. and Thomas Mitchell, Rita Hayworth. Just that the ambiance of that movie feels very much like what would have happened if someone had taken Caniff seriously, if looked at the material as anything other than a penny dreadful, as opposed to what it really was, which was an observation on the passing grade of American masculinity in the 20th century.
I have some of those images loaded up here. Let's start at the beginning of this sequence here because this is just a great. Whoops, where did it go? Here. So you mentioned John Ford earlier, and I never made that connection, but John Ford is just an incredible filmmaker, and his use of black and white, like shadows, framing with shadows, is so Milton Caniff as well, or maybe Milton Caniff is so John Ford. But this panel really emphasizes that at the beginning here with just the way, especially in the second panel, with the way the shadows of the building kind of frame Pat and Burma here in the light. I love it. I think it's great.
What I'm looking at here is the transition from deep shadow to lit edge to lit to fully frontal lit.
Yeah, look at that.
And he uses the lighting in the service of narrative, closer and closer, getting toward the idea and selling the idea of what we're looking at.
Amazing.
It's just great stuff. I mean, are you familiar with the cinematographer John Alton?
Not really, no.
All right, you should be. Alton worked with Anthony Mann quite a bit. He wrote a book called Painting with Light. If you want to see Alton at his finest, you want to see probably three pictures. One is called T-Men.
Okay.
The other is Raw Deal. Both are very low-budget noirs shot for a British-American co-production company. And the third, probably the most effective, is a movie called Reign of Terror, also known as Black Book, which is literally a film noir that takes place during the French Revolution. And if Alex Toth didn't study this movie frame by frame, I would be stunned.
Okay.
It is deeply informed by the kind of lighting effects you're discussing, you're describing in Caniff's work.
Mm.
And it's made, there's no money spent. It's every penny is on the screen, and it is an astonishing example of black and white brilliance. I cannot recommend it highly enough. I believe the complete version and a pretty good digital copy of it is on YouTube right now.
Okay.
It'll knock you out. It's so good. And it's
Fantastic.
pretty good. I mean, Richard Basehart plays Robespierre, and Robert Cummings plays the hero, Arlene Dahl. It's just terrific. It really is. And it's visually staggering in its graphics. Nice stuff.
Great. Okay, let's go on to the second strip in this sequence here. You mentioned the shift from dark to light. Well, this one kind of has an opposite, with the backgrounds going from light to dark to really bring the focus on Burma in the third panel, and then all of a sudden flash back to bright for the last one to really emphasize how how wild she's getting, yelling yellow.
But you're missing that fourth panel, which is her white space against that black space.
Yes.
And narratively speaking, this is the first time we see anything in the realm of vulnerability in Burma.
Mm-hmm.
She's always been she's Carol Lombard, she's Joan Bennett, she's Madeline Carroll, but mostly Carol Lombard. Just a tough dame. Yeah. If language strictures had not been in place back then, I'm sure she would have been as vulgar as Carol Lombard was. And this stuff it's exemplary.
What I also love about Caniff here is his lettering and the emphasis. Like, first of all, the cadence, the way that his words flow, but also just where he chooses to put the underlined words, and which underlined words are bigger. And then in this last panel, he's got bigger words that aren't underlined, and then really, really big words at the bottom, but they all have a very specific purpose. And when you read it, you can't help but inflect a certain way.
And one of the things that has to be borne in mind is this is the first. This is the first time. This is the beginning. This is the birth. It's very difficult for a contemporary reader to look at material made in this time and see beyond the number of times it's been imitated, quoted, plagiarized, and misused. It's very difficult, but I believe it's a form of intellectual honesty and curiosity to seek out and understand where this stuff begins, why it begins, and what it is about this beginning that gives it value. It's really important to me. And look, and here he goes in an entirely different direction. He sets up a complete bip 4-panel background and nothing more. There's only one background in the entire 4 panels, and it's there solely for Pat to have something to lean on. There's action. The only action here is he's shaking out his pipe. He's leaning. The only reason there's a background in that second panel is for Pat to be insouciant about it. That's really what it's about. And he's it's fantastic work. And as a kid, it's hard to see the simplicity achieved here as illustration, because you're looking for more Baroque and Rococo effect. And here it is that this is why this was a strip that was read by grown-ups. I think it's an unfortunate statement of the reality of the time that the Terry and the Pirates was adapted into a 12-part chapter play for kids. That the Terry and the Pirates television series was stupid ass junk for kids. And Robert Culp had the rights to Terry and the Pirates for quite some time, and couldn't get anyone interested in making the movie. And it's the sort of thing where if you could look at the material and look past it as genre material, as opposed to being part of an effluvia of a genre, because I think comics has gone from being a medium to a genre, particularly over the past 10 years, because of the success of all these movies, which have obviated the need for comic books and replaced them with movies. That the reason that he couldn't get anyone interested in Terry and the Pirates was because no one could see doing a period piece. They felt that Indiana Jones had covered that action, that the romantic value of the material had ceased to have merit for the audience, and that there was no one out there who was going to spend the kind of money required to make this movie. And hold on a second. I'm being summoned. Bear with me a second, Kurtis. I'm sorry.
Sure. No, that's fine. I'm going to throw this strip back up here. And I just want to look at some of these details. Like you already mentioned Pat shaking out his pipe in the first panel. I love just that little detail. We don't have static figures here. This isn't a strip of talking heads. There's action, and even Burma with the cigarette in her hands, and the little details like in the third panel where she's grasping inside. But like the hair is between her fingers and such. It's like just amazing little realism that he infuses into his drawings here.
I mean, luckily for Caniff, Sickles was a terrible writer. You know,
yeah,
it's true. I mean, Scorchy is beautiful to look at and as boring as you can. It's a dull strip. It's an erase for Dead Heat for Last with Rip Kirby. How boring Rip Kirby is. It's beautiful. Rip Kirby is gorgeous, but it's just. And that's true of Scorchy as well. But Caniff was able to couple up his skills at writing, and that skills at writing included pacing, as you pointed out, and with dramatic drawing, with characters behaving and acting in a way that was effective and direct.
Yeah,
these are all skill sets that have, for the most part, vanished as the audience has become much more interested in momentary sensation. You know, there's been discussion over the past couple of days about story, and you know the fact that podcasts behave as if they're stories, and they're not. Stories are not. This happens. This happens. This happens. This happens. There are. I mean, for example, I've always felt that if you look at crime writers and thriller writers, you can tell the ones who've grown up with comics and grown up with movies. I mean, I'm convinced that McBain grew up with comics. His creation of the 87th Precinct in a fictional city, which is basically New York on its side. And I know that you know, Stephen Hunter, who was the film critic of the Baltimore Sun for so many years, his breakout novel, Point of Impact, is a textbook, a lesson in structure and narrative, laying stuff out. And remember, Caniff was doing it 3-4 panels a day. And he would do narratives that would last over a period of months. And the serialization of the material was such that you got incredibly little information per day. And then he would basically encapsulize for the Sunday. There were people who only got the Sundays, who only got the dailies. And the organization and pattern of narrative of that is masterful. It really is. I cannot imagine functioning that way. There's a reason he made the kind of money he did. He was well paid, comparatively speaking, for this time. You look at pictures of his studio. It's like, oh my God, look! Oh, I want that studio so bad. But yeah, I mean, he set up and paid off material. You know, the archetype, of course. This is one of those archetypes, and obviously the Raven Sherman sequence is a classic example of his understanding of how to manipulate an audience in the best way possible.
Yeah. Oh boy, definitely. Yeah, that was pretty groundbreaking. I should have brought that sequence in too. Okay, did you have something that you went to get that you wanted to show, or why did you leave the?
Oh, my front door is being repainted.
Oh, okay, I see.
my painter needed an extension cord.
Okay. So
life does intrude.
That's the wrong strip. Hold on, I'm having.
Yeah, you're getting ahead of yourself.
Out of order. So we should have. I had them all out of order. This one was first. This one's second, and then this one's third. Yellow, and now we're getting to the climax here with this strip here. And what
I find fascinating about this is the balls that he has to do nothing but crop figures. He doesn't get any. He never shows you a full figure.
Yeah. And then you have a full background in this first panel, a shaded background in the second, and then nothing in the third. So it just reduces the simplicity in the last panel is so striking because because of the panels that come before it. And same with the speech bubbles. You have a lot of words, and then you have fewer words.
Balloons. They're not bubbles. They're balloons.
Balloons.
Not bubbles. I'm going to come up. I'm going to Vancouver. If you don't stop that, I'm coming up there right now.
Okay, I apologize. The balloons. They just get smaller and smaller until this last panel again. Of course, we have nothing, and it's just such a great. The flow of these 4 panels is just incredible. This is one of the most famous Terry strips, if not the most famous one of all of them, because
I think it's up there, but I think the Raven Sherman page sequence is better known.
Yeah,
it's serious. You know, I mean, there are all these people quibble a great deal with Caniff's drawing. You know, that he's not the draftsman, say that Foster was, or Raymond. I mean, you look at the proportions of that. You look at panel 3. Look at the size of her hands compared to her head, and just there are all sorts of weird proportional elements. But it doesn't matter at all. It is all about the emotional impact of the material. It really is.
Yeah, that's true. I wouldn't have even noticed the hands versus the head if you hadn't mentioned it just now. And then the final strip. I can't even imagine reading this daily. It's like having to wait a full 24 hours in between, and they're still kissing. But yeah, again, the same thing with the sparse backgrounds to really emphasize the emotional impact of what's going on here, and then this final panel, which is full background, a lot of detail, as a stark contrast to what came before it, kind of bringing us back into this from the surrealism of the kiss, kind of punching us back into reality.
And what I find fascinating is that he's able to get away with doing a final shot in which panels 3 and 4 are clearly of the same, taking place within seconds of each other, but not visually connected, not graphically connected. Mm-hmm. I don't think you can get away with that today. I think you'd have to include some sense of Pat and Burma in that last panel to connect to more tightly connect the images in the narrative.
Hmm. Yeah, but it works really well here. So yeah, it's so great. What a great sequence. The other thing that Dean sent me a couple of things that I wanted to share today. And he sent me this because he says it ties in to the piece that you did, which we'll show a little bit later in the live stream as well. And
you have it?
Do you want to show that right now?
Do you have the piece I sent you?
I do have it, yes.
Great, it got through. Thank heaven.
It got through. It did. I have it all ready to go. And do you think we should show it before we show this sequence or after?
Let's talk about those early days of Burma. Let's talk about that stuff.
Sure. Okay. Let's make sure I have them in order this time here. This is the first one here. He sent me this because because of all the references to the song, the St. Louis Blues. And I will, I'll show something after we talk about this sequence here about St. Louis Blues. What I like about this strip here is that in the middle panel here, in the 2 middle panels, we have the screen tone pattern totally fading out the background, and then the 2 characters are completely white without any sort of shading at all. I think because of it must be a bright moonlight or something like that, but they really stand out, and you get a little bit of that highlight in the final panel, but you don't see it at all in those middle 2. And then we'll go on to the second one here. Again,
This is where where the strip begins to become itself. That last panel is I mean, the drawing is still wonky.
Yeah.
The drawing. I mean, look at the proportions on Terry in panel 2, but by panel 4, you get to the point where he's beginning to understand. I mean, he's channeling Sickles here. He's beginning to absorb the idea that Sickles has, which is that idea of chiaroscuro. Caravaggio was his name, chiaroscuro was his game. And it plays out here nicely. I mean, just the effect of light.
Yes.
And again, like the grayness of panels 1, 2, and 3, suddenly interrupted by the strong, hard black and white shadow. It's just sensational.
And that third panel, I just love the framing of it with the road that curves, leading your eye in the direction that they are running, but also leading your eye directly into the next panel. I think it's just such a great flow in that one panel there. Okay, let's see. The next one is this one here, and we're introduced to Burma dancing, which is a side of her that we don't get to see very often. That middle panel again with the light, just hints of light around the silhouettes.
For me, these daily strips are so transcendent of the strip that began our first this sequence that the use of black and white shadow is an entirely different idea.
It really is. But I also like his little, like this wicker chair that's in the last panel.
Right, exactly. I know.
So great.
I mean, his interest in pattern, shows up left and right.
It's just such an odd choice as well because it covers up half of the record player, which is kind of a focus.
But it also frames it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's a great frame to the whole panel. And then the song, of course, she's listening to, St. Louis Blues. And then we go into the next panel here. Between panel 2 and 3 here, you get an odd, almost a 180-degree turn, like she's turning around. But so that's something that I think is a little bit odd here, but it seems to work for the story because you need to have them on.
I'm one of those people who not subscribe in any way to the 180-degree line as it applies to comics.
Yeah.
The 180 stuff works fine in the movies, but it doesn't play here. I mean, Caniff demonstrates this consistently. Angles shift and move, and I think that third panel works great. I really do. One of the things about the format that they're working with is you're stuck with the kind of frame because you've got a lot of text to play with.
Right.
And consider the fact that in panel 1, he has a balloon overlap from panel 1 to panel 2. They break out. I mean, he's pointing at graphic directions that hadn't been considered before. And I wasn't being facetious earlier about the Cliff Sterrett stuff, because Sterrett was apparently unrestrained, but obviously an extraordinary graphic designer, as was Caniff. And Caniff's graphic design improves exponentially. Between 1936 and 1940, he cements what he's doing. And there becomes what appears to be a casual ease of the material that is, it may be casual, but it sure ain't easy. It's beautiful.
Now, if you look at these strips, I mentioned the text, like the lettering, and none of these words are underlined. So you get to make up your own inflection as you want to here. Whereas in contrast to the stuff that we showed earlier, which is actually a sequence that happens a month later, where he does rely heavily on the underlined or bold words. So I can't remember if that was the first time he was using it was in that other sequence.
I mean, interestingly enough, when I did my tribute, my pastiche piece, Ken Bruce and I did the lettering for it, and he pointed out that very fact, that the lack of emphasis and the use of emphasis when it was chosen. Can you hold this thought for just a second? Because I have to go to the toilet. You okay with that? Yeah, just keep talking. Speak amongst yourselves. See what happens.
Yeah, you bet.
And my age thing can't be held in.
I do want to say that. Let's see here. We have some comments. You can leave a comment on Facebook, on Instagram, on Facebook, or where we are live streaming. You can leave a comment, and we'll try and address some comments. I have one question for Howard that we'll address when he returns. But let's go back over to this. Which strip were we on? Oh yeah, this strip here. I think Howard was saying how the 180-degree rule doesn't necessarily apply to comics, and taking a step back and looking at how all of these panels are laid out is kind of interesting, because you have in the first panel you have, well, just on the sheer fact that the first panel is on the left, our main characters are on the left-hand side. So it does make sense for Burma to be holding a gun, pointing it to the left, especially because that's kind of how we see visually, looking at all of these panels as a whole. We see Pat and the gang on the left in the first panel, and then Burma pointing the gun toward them in the third panel. And then that's reflected in totality here in the fourth panel with them all in the same frame together. So that's, I can see actually it works visually well to lay it out like that.
I'm back.
Look at that. Okay, I've got a comment for you. We have a comment from the Drunken Sailor who says, "Who's the other guy that Chaykin mentioned?"
Noel Sickles. Noel Sickles was a cartoonist a year or two older than Caniff, who'd met him in Ohio. Sickles did a strip called Scorchy Smith. He passed through comics. He went from he used his comic strip technique and added graphic tone and grays and became a major American illustrator. And he mentored Caniff. He penciled some of Terry in the late 1930s. And much of what Caniff popularized in Terry and the Pirates is techniques that he learned from Sickles. And, from that you get everybody from Lee Elias to early Johnny Craig to Frank Robbins, just a lot of guys, Alex Toth. Just the use of chiaroscuro was the gift that Sickles gave to the world in that regard.
And the Library of American Comics has published a fantastic book on Noel Sickles, The Art of Noel Sickles. And it's pretty hard to get these days, but if you can manage to track down a copy, it's well worth the price because
it's fabulous.
So
I'm looking at mine right now. It's up there, and I'm going, no one's getting my copy.
Yep, absolutely fantastic.
So I'm glad that the Genius stuff is going to come out in paperback. That's just fantastic news. I know a lot of people are dying to get their hands on that stuff.
Yeah, actually, I'll point out also that when Dean made that book the first time around, he and Lorraine beautifully restored the John Fury strip that he did for very, very small audience for the Navy in 1955. But the last page was missing. You just couldn't find it. No one had a copy of it. But in the time that book was published, and now he found the page. So this paperback copy is going to have that final page, the conclusion of the story that was missing, unfortunately missing in the hardcover book. So there's a bonus for you if you want to pick up the paperback.
Greatest lunatics, yes indeed.
Okay, final strip in this sequence here, where they sit down to have a conversation. And again, I want to emphasize so much that he doesn't do just talking heads. The camera goes around the table as they're talking, so that first of all, so that they can get the word balloons in order, but just also to keep it interesting. I love it. And the fact that they have a center lit candle above them, which provides different shading on each of these characters to also to use as framing and to emphasize who's speaking is very, very cool.
And in that regard, the way Burma in that last in panel 4 is clearly lowering her head and leaning forward underneath the light.
Yes.
So that what's lit is her shoulders, the back of her neck, and the top of her head, while the rest of her is in grayed shadow in halftone.
So good, yeah. It's just amazing.
It's a phenomenally subtle effect that was functionally unnecessary, but served beautifully.
Yep, definitely. Okay, so I have a couple of bonuses here. Dean sent these along to me that he found these in
Rudy
archives.
Out.
So St. Louis Blues was written by W.C. Handy, and this is a signed copy of the sheet music that Handy gave to Milton Caniff after he saw that his song was mentioned in the strips. You can see it's dated 1936. And then he also accompanied that with this letter. And I'll read the letter out loud for all of you. It says, "Dear Mr. Caniff, before taking up Monday's business, I am writing you first to thank you for the 3 consecutive plugs on St. Louis blues. Many persons tell me that St. Louis blues will never die. I have my doubts when they make such statements, but such work as yours will go far in keeping my humble efforts alive. You have no idea how many persons have brought this cartoon or phoned or told me of it in passing. As a token of appreciation, I'm pleased to send you an autographed copy for your collection, which I trust you will receive in good shape and appreciate same in the same spirit as I am sending it. Best wishes. With best wishes, I am very truly yours, W.C. Handy.
Hot damn.
Yeah, and he sent this February 24th in 1936. So it was the day after. He sent it the day after the first mention of St. Louis blues in the strip. So very cool.
Today there would be all the discussion of product placement and how dare you? How dare you say it?
But that was that. Yeah, and that wasn't it at all. He just like
walk across town. I mean, 1587 Broadway is at around 50th Street, I believe, 48th Street, around that time. And Caniff was working and living in Tudor City, which was on 43rd Street and 2nd Avenue. Nice. They got a pit stop and had a late lunch at the Palm. Ribeyes and half and half.
Totally. Well, I think this is a good time to bring up the page that you did for our new collection. So let me give some context here. Library of American Comics is going to be reprinting Terry and the Pirates once again. We have, of course, the whole thing collected in these landscape volumes, and 6 volumes that collect the entire run, the entire 12 years. But we are going to be doing these large format books that are they're going to be huge, presenting Terry and the Pirates as it originally appeared in a full tab sheets.
Oh, kidding!
And it's Dean recently discovered Caniff's own scrapbooks that he made of the newspaper syndicate proof sheets. So all of these Sundays are it's going to be Sundays and dailies, but all of the Sundays are going to be shot from proof sheets, and it's going to look spectacular, better than you've ever seen them, opposed to these collections, which are still great, but these were all mostly newspaper tear sheets that they were scanned from. So
one more thing is going to take up space in my house. Damn you! Right. Damn you!
So these are available through a publisher called Clover Press. You can go to cloverpress.us and you can pre-order copies. Volume 1 was scheduled to come out at the end of this month, but there's so many frustrations in the printing world right now with delays and backlogs with printers and shipping that we're not exactly sure when it's going to come out, but there are delays. It's more likely going to be maybe the end of April. But he's releasing volume 1, and it's going to contain all of the first year, technically 1934 and 35 together. And then every subsequent volume will collect 1 year of Terry and the Pirates. So it'll be a 12-volume set with a special 13th volume that will have a new biography of Terry and the Pirates. Just kind of laying out the history, some new artwork. A lot of the stuff that you see in the bonus material of here will return in that volume as well. And as a bonus, we asked a number of notable cartoonists to provide a brand new Terry and the Pirates comic page, an art piece in a sense, that we can make into a 16-page book that'll be like its own comic section, like you'd find in the olden days of newspapers. And Howard, you did one for us. I'm gonna pull it up here and show everybody. Here's the piece that you did for us, and you can see it has. Why don't you tell us how it relates to what we've been talking about here?
Well, Dean, years ago, when Dean and I were first talking about the material, I expressed the specific that it was clearly Louis Armstrong's version of St. Louis blues that Burma was listening to on that Victrola. There was no question about it in my mind, and Dean completely agreed. Dean and I are both jazz enthusiasts with our crossover on tastes. Comic strips and jazz are a major part of it. So what I wanted to do was something that was Terry mid-war with Burma, And the franchise basically it's Burma's birthday. And Terry pops up out of nowhere. Burma is working as a hostess at the Stage Door Canteen, which is on 44th Street in New York City back in the day, and gives her a present. A lovely gift. At this point, he's a flight lieutenant. This is I'm figuring this is 42, 43, around that time. And that was it. We got to see Burma in her usual dismissiveness, but then that moment of vulnerability that had nothing to do with Pat Ryan kissing her, and everything to do with fandom at its best. And Ken Bruzenak did an absolutely bitchin' job of transliterating what Caniff's lettering looked like. And Gustavo Yen, who works under the name of Yen Nitro, who is my colorist these days, did an absolutely spectacular job as well. I didn't want to do, I don't feel I'm capable of doing a drawing style that looks like Caniff. What I wanted to do is do a layout style that resonated with Caniff, and I think I achieved that pretty successfully. I'm pretty happy with that.
Yeah.
I had a great time doing this. I truly did. It was a treat. I was grateful to be asked and delighted to do it. And this is the first time anybody's seeing this publicly. No one has seen this.
Yeah, this is very exclusive right now for all of you who are paying attention here to the live stream. And if you want to have an actual physical paper copy of this, it is only available as a bonus 16-page comic section if you pre-order Terry and the Pirates through cloverpress.us. You can't get this through comic book shops. You need to go straight to the publisher source. So we're offering also the book at a discount. It'll be cheaper than you can get it at a comic book store. So it's well worth going over to cloverpress.us to check that out and pre-order a copy. If you pre-order volume 1 and 13, we're releasing volume 1 and 13 at the same time. 13 being the history of Terry and the Pirates. You'll get this comic section. If you pre-order a subscription of all 12, technically 13 volumes, you'll get this comic page as well, and you'll get all of the volumes at a deep discount. Plus, that we're going to throw in volume 13 in for free. It's a heck of a deal. Let's see. Bill says, very excited about your upcoming Terry series. Have the first one pre-ordered. Thanks, Bill. I do want to put in a good word for Steve Canyon and Rip Kirby, however. There you go. We have a Steve Canyon and Rip Kirby fan. Well, that's fine. I mean,
I understand, Bill. I'm a big fan of both strips. But Terry is better.
Well, everyone has their own preferences, so that's.
No, I know best.
Of course.
That's subjective. It's Hey, Greg, how are you, man?
This is always for you. This beautiful way to celebrate Milton Caniff. Well done. And I liked your signature in the first panel. How you mimicked Milton Caniff's signature.
That's all Ken Bruzenak. Ken did that. I didn't do that at all. Bruzenak, we are twin sons of different mothers, and Ken knows his way around the world. So yeah, it was an absolute joy to do it. I'm delighted about this thing, and I'm really pissed I now have to find new space on my shelves. To hell with you people! Damn you! Damn you!
Yep, we all do.
These other oversized things too. The Walton Skizix, the Milk Gross, the new thing from Tops, and all that stuff. So these giant books that are taking up all the space in my office. What am I going to do?
What are you going to do? I don't know. And there's going to be 13 of these Terry and the Pirates ones. Okay, so we're coming up toward the end of our time here. But Howard, what are some of the other projects that you are working on right now that you'd like to tell our listeners and their viewers about?
Well, I'm working right now on the third volume of Hey Kids Comics, Volume 3, as I say, which explores the aspect of fandom and its impact on comics. I've got a new crime series that's going to be showing up on a website called Neotext, featuring the characters from a thing I did for Dark Horse some years back called Marked Man. And I just completed a 6-issue arc of a mini-series with Mark Guggenheim, a writer I love working with. Although I promised myself a year ago that I wouldn't work with anybody else. I just got stuck because I like working with Mark. most of the work I'm doing is for Image and with various other places. But I've sort of aged out of both Marvel and DC, and ultimately it's become a gift as opposed to a problem, because it enabled me to do other stuff that is just more challenging and more fun. So stick with me. The trade paperbacks of Hey Kids Volumes 1 and 2 are out there on Comixology and in paper as well. Pick them up, buy them, and read them and weep, as they say. Thanks, Chris.
So I have the first volume of Hey Kids Comics, and I love it. And I'd love to I got to talk to you more about that, because it's just got a fascinating kind of a peek behind the window, and I just need to know like what's real and what's not, kind of a thing. And
as I said once, a lot of it didn't happen, but it's all true.
Yeah, exactly. But that's a conversation for another time. So I do. I need to get on getting volume 2 there, because it's good stuff.
I expect you. I'm watching you.
Okay. Perfect. Okay, well, thanks everybody for listening and for being a part of our conversation today, and especially thank you to you, Howard, for being a part of this. Talking with you about Milton Caniff was extra special. I loved going through those strips and hearing your insight into the drawing and the storytelling. Such a great time.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me, Kurtis, and give my love to Dean, please.
Will do. Okay, thanks everybody. I will use our theme song to send us out.